This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, and faith-focused feature stories with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good Friday afternoon. Thanks for checking in. Hundreds still missing in the mud and debris after that catastrophic flash flood that swept entire villages away in the Himalayan mountains between Nepal and Tibet. Fox's Jeff Paul gets us started.
With so many still missing, there are fears the death toll will only keep rising. Rescue teams have reportedly found bodies hundreds of miles downstream from the most devastated areas. Many roads right now are buried in mud and debris, and dozens of bridges have been literally ripped apart. That's only complicating recovery efforts, where sometimes the only way to get help in is by helicopter.
A glacier-triggered landslide's what caused this disaster 2 days ago. David Fisher with the Red Cross is helping lead recovery efforts.
Well, the first order of business has got to be basic needs. So many people have lost their homes. A lot of them have gathered in schools and government buildings. We're providing food, we're providing blankets, we're providing some of the basic hygiene items, but you can't live like this for very long.
A half dozen Americans have been safely evacuated. 90 others remain missing. Rescue workers today forced to halt their search for survivors after a lake created by all that floodwater burst its banks in Chinese-controlled Tibet. Today marks the 6-month anniversary of the war with Iran. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says despite the economic uncertainty this war has created, it was the right move to take on Iran.
I understand the concerns of the American people. I don't diminish them or take them at all lightly. But I do remind everyone, we had deferred this risk for an awfully long time. We'd had so many Americans killed in the Middle East for so many years. No president was willing to get to them before they had a nuclear weapon.
Military analyst Jack Posobiec talks about how politics is playing into this war.
Obviously, we're about 70 days out from an election, so that's something that the president, of course, and the administration is working their hardest to see if they can get to a fruition here, because that's exactly what's going on. Tehran is trying to wait out the United States' election clock, while the United States is seeing if they can increase the pressure on the regime before that takes place.
A federal judge has blocked again President Trump's executive order that limits mail-in voting. This ruling blocks for 2 weeks implementation of the order and comes with only days to go before the first mail-in ballots go out for the November midterms. Here's ABC's Dave Packer.
Judge Indira Talwani says the rule is likely unconstitutional and would be practically impossible for states to follow before the midterm elections. The rule would give the Postal Service greater authority over mail-in ballots, including verifying voter eligibility. The decision's likely to face another appeal.
With the midterms now just 67 days off, President Trump's trying to boost Republican chances in key battlegrounds. One of those battlegrounds is the Texas U.S. Senate race. The latest Fox News poll shows Republican Ken Paxton is trailing Democrat James Tallarico. It has been nearly 40 years since a Democrat has won a U.S. Senate race in Texas. President Trump has signed an executive order renaming Lake Ontario Lake America.
So if you think about it, we have a Gulf and we have a lake. Now all we need is an ocean. So maybe we'll have to change the name of the Atlantic and or the Pacific. Maybe we'll change them both.
These Western New Yorkers not fans of the name change. However,
I don't really like it. I wanted to just stay that way, stay the original name, Ontario. It's our home. It's part of our history.
So the reason I'm here today is because Trump signed this ridiculous bill into law, changing the name of the lake to Lake America. I don't know who that serves. I don't know how that makes groceries cheaper.
The Lake Ontario name change, the latest move in an escalating trade war with Canada. The White House now threatening to double tariffs on Canadian-made cars and auto parts. Canada enacting its own retaliatory tariffs on American imports, and they will kick in the day after Labor Day. Tropical storm Dolly has formed in the Atlantic and is heading toward the Leeward Islands in the Caribbean. Storm names are established years in advance, and lists are reused every 6 years unless the name's retired. Dolly is not associated with the recent passing of country music icon Dolly Parton. Still to come on the Noon Report, Shapiro in the driver's seat, Allegheny County's balloon ban, and Sandusky gets his day in court.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. The weekend almost upon us, and it looks like a winner weather-wise. I'll have forecast details coming up.
Okay, Kevin, we'll check back with you in about 10 minutes, but first let's check the stories making news where you live, all across New York and Pennsylvania. A new Franklin and Marshall College poll shows Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro enjoying a commanding lead over his Republican rival in the run-up to the November 3rd midterm election. Shapiro leads State Treasurer Stacey Garrity by a 2-to-1 margin, 50 to 25%. The survey shows, financially speaking, more than half of all Pennsylvanians are worse off today than they were 1 year ago. A recent study by MIT shows the average Pennsylvania family of four needs a yearly income of almost $250,000 in order to live comfortably. Right now, the median household income in Pennsylvania is just over $100,000 a year. Starting this fall, all students enrolled at a SUNY school in New York must take a course on civic responsibility. Here's SUNY Chancellor John King.
It builds civic discourse skills because we want students to be good at participating in our democracy.
King tells Spectrum News the civics course is designed to teach students how to engage in difficult conversations on complicated issues with people they do not agree with politically. There are nearly 390,000 students enrolled at SUNY's 64 colleges and universities all across New York. A federal judge has just denied a Blair County, Pennsylvania school from dismissing a lawsuit filed by two teachers that challenges the district's policy when it comes to LGBTQ-themed displays. These educators in Hollidaysburg, near Altoona, wanted the right to exhibit gay, lesbian, and trans-friendly banners on school property. The teachers argue the policy was selectively enforced against LGBTQ-related expression, while religious messages, they say, were allowed there in Hollidaysburg. Fairport Central School near Rochester, New York, has implemented a change in the start time when students return to the classroom in just a few more days.
It wasn't about, like, what do you think and feel, right? It was about what is best for kids.
That's Superintendent Brett Provenzano, and he tells Spectrum News.
There's so many things physiologically, biologically occurring that they need the rest. And we've studied it multiple times. We've partnered with pediatricians. We've had focus groups, community forums.
Middle and high school students at Fairport will start almost an hour later than last year. Elementary students will start about an hour earlier than last year.
Elementary school age children are mostly already awake at that time, and so it's not against their biologic rhythm to be starting earlier.
Dr. Heidi Connolly is the director of pediatric sleep medicine at the University of Rochester Medical Center. Jerry Sandusky, the disgraced former Penn State football coach, will be in court again next month in Center County, Pennsylvania. ABC's Aaron Katursky.
This is just an evidentiary hearing. This is not going to be a motion for a new trial or anything like that, but Sandusky has long maintained his innocence.
The 82-year-old Sandusky was convicted of sexually abusing disadvantaged boys back in 2012. Now one of his accusers is recanting his account of what happened. More legal maneuvering, both for and against New York's controversial Local Cops, Local Crimes Act. The sheriff of Wayne County's joined a lawsuit with more than a dozen other sheriffs to try and block implementation of that law. Broome County Sheriff Fred Akshar is part of this litigation.
The New York State Constitution speaks specifically to the establishment of the office of sheriff and who dictates who can or can't serve as their county's sheriff. It's not some bureaucrat in Albany. It is the good people of their respective communities.
The Local Cops, Local Crimes Act prevents local police from cooperating with ICE in civil immigration matters. Governor Hochul and Attorney General James are suing Rensselaer County for refusing to enforce the statute, which also prevents ICE detainees from being incarcerated in county jails. Governor Hochul's highlighting reform measures meant to crack down on staged auto accidents, which have led to a spike in car insurance rates all across the Empire State.
They've been getting away with it for so long. There was no deterrent to stop them. Our reforms will make it easier to hunt down and prosecute the ringleaders who orchestrate these schemes, recruit participants.
The governor notes because of her reforms, New Yorkers should notice a reduction in their car insurance rates.
The insurance company is on notice. These reforms are substantial. Some of them are mirrored after what has happened in other states where they literally saw not just no longer increases in premiums, but a reduction.
The governor recently enacted a series of measures that make it easier to prosecute doctors, lawyers, drivers, and passengers who take part in staged automobile crashes. Pennsylvania Agriculture Secretary Russell Redding says the Commonwealth has lost 200,000 acres of farmland in less than a decade. Included in the loss of the farmland is a lot of farms. Mel Curtis with the Center County YMCA anti-hunger campaign says less farms means less food.
The population isn't slowing down much, okay? So what's going to happen when we have a higher demand for food, but we don't have the production to make that food to give to these families?
Curtis says the demand for food assistance has never been higher, and hidden hunger, as he puts it, is not just affecting those who live in poverty. Fort Drum in northern New York's one of 5 Army bases nationwide that's been chosen by our military to add nuclear micro-reactors. It's all part of the Janus program, which ensures a secure and reliable power supply at military bases. More from Family Life's Sarah Harnish.
Army officials say the reactor can connect into the normal energy grid and would generate enough power for more than 16,000 average-sized homes. Used fuel and activated materials will stay on site for a brief, federally mandated cool-down period before being transported to federal facilities for storage or recycling. Fort Drum is the largest military installation in New York State and is home to the 10th Mountain Division. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Thank you, Sarah. If you're planning a birthday party, wedding reception, or any other kind of celebration, one western Pennsylvania county says leave the balloons at home. Family Life's Brian Query explains.
Allegheny County, which includes the city of Pittsburgh, has implemented a policy banning balloons in all 9 county parks effective immediately. The new rule applies to helium-filled latex and water balloons, as well as sky lanterns. Under the new rules, balloons are banned from decorative or prop use at park shelters, wedding venues, park facilities, and all events hosted within the parks. County officials established the policy in direct response to recurring litter and debris left behind by visitors. The discarded balloon materials require substantial annual cleanup efforts from maintenance crews and volunteers. In addition to the maintenance burden, the county said balloon debris poses a direct physical threat to local wildlife in the parks. Brian Query, Family Life News.
Thank you, Brian. Keeping in the Commonwealth, the matchups are set for Championship Saturday at the Little League World Series in South Williamsport. Japan will face Curacao for the International Championship. The Great Lakes team will take on the Mountain Region in the U.S. Championship, and the winners of those games will play for all the marbles at the Little League World Series finale on Sunday. We've got more sports next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, the final preseason football game ended with the Bills coming from behind in the game's final minute to win it 28-27. Buffalo, playing without Josh Allen, scored on a 2-yard touchdown run from Ian Wheeler and then scored the 2-point conversion on an off-balance throw by Steve Buechele. The Bills finished the preseason a perfect 3-0. They will open the season at Houston on September 13th. Now to baseball. The Yankees couldn't muster up much of an offense against Hayden Wesneski, and they lost the rubber game of their series against the Astros 5-1. Christian Walker hit a 2-run home run for Houston. Also losing the rubber game of their series, the New York Mets, who fell to the best team in the bigs, the Milwaukee Brewers, 8-2. Jackson Chourio, 4 for 5, had two 2-run home runs to lead the Brew Crew. Elsewhere in an abbreviated schedule, Kansas City blew out Toronto 13-2. Jack Caglione had 5 hits, including a home run, and he drove in a career-high 6 runs for the Royals. The Nats were 7-1 winners over the Rockies. It was an old-fashioned pitcher's duel in Atlanta as the Braves' Chris Sale struck out 11 in a 5-hit shutout. Drake Baldwin hit the first pitch of the game into the left field seats for the only run of the game. The Giants beat Arizona 6-1. St. Louis a 7-5 winner over Baltimore. Finally this, the NCAA power conferences are fighting back. The ACC passed a resolution banning pros from returning to college sports, joining the other Power 4 conferences and setting forth eligibility enforcement. It is the right move. That is a look at sports.
All right, thank you, Randy. Still to come on the Noon Report for a Friday, we've got weekend weather with weatherman Kevin Williams. Wingfest is this weekend, and where else? Buffalo. And we'll take in a tour of the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum in Ulysses, PA. It's today's staycation destination, and it's coming up next.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Earlier this week, President Trump and Education Secretary Linda McMahon announced a crackdown on school districts that assist students with so-called transitioning without parental consent. Citing the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, Trump said this, quote, "Every public school in America is on notice. If they tell a child that they're trapped in the wrong body, they are committing child abuse," end quote. The administration's actions are, of course, in stark contrast to the previous one. Almost immediately, advocates began to accuse the administration of lying about transgender children. Lisa Leitner wrote this in an article for MSN.com, quote, "No, schools are not secretly medically transitioning children. They're not prescribing hormones. They're not performing gender-affirming surgery. Teachers are not administering puberty blockers. Guidance counselors are not secretly arranging medical transitions behind parents' backs," end quote. It was as if a common script had been distributed. It became a loud chorus of just denial. Deny what parents are in fact claiming. Deny that teachers, counselors, and after-school clubs taught and even targeted certain children with gender ideology. Deny that students were treated as if they were the opposite sex on campus with new names, pronouns, and even sometimes outfits, all while hiding this social transition from parents. And yet, moms and dads from California to Maine keep reporting that though their children were questioning their bodies and exploring identities, they were never notified by school officials. In many cases, these children were encouraged and assisted in this confusion by school officials. Often, if parents learned about their child's mental distress and protested, they were met with psychological threats like, "Would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter?" And in some states, even legal threats for so-called dead naming their children. But everyone should know, especially anyone being gaslighted by this "it never happened" talking point, there are receipts. Erin Lee, director of Protect Kids Colorado, posted those receipts on X, and they included her own story. I quote, "Fascinating how so many people out here are saying this doesn't happen and this is a made-up MAGA problem. Let me shed some light. This happened to my little girl. I went public and discovered it happened to many others. I sued all the way to the Supreme Court, along with other affected parents. The school district admitted to and defended it in legal documents. Justice Alito called our case troubling and tragic and an issue of great and growing national importance. It was a living nightmare that almost destroyed my child." Lee then cited numerous other examples, included 6 cases that have reached the Supreme Court and another 14 that are working their way up through the lower courts. This thing that isn't happening is apparently happening all over the country. Alliance Defending Freedom has reported on numerous cases and now represents a growing number of parents who were kept in the dark by school officials. In one of his opinions, Justice Alito cited an estimated 6,000 public schools in the U.S. now operate under so-called gender-affirming policies that specifically exclude parents. And a group known as Defending Education keeps a list of offending school districts online. So thank God for these efforts by the White House to rein in the madness. But especially thank God for those moms, dads, and grandparents who stood up to the lies that were being sold to their children in secret and are now willing to expose them in public. We owe it to them to stand with them, and especially to their children. Share these stories. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint.
All right, time to head outside next. It's weather where you live with meteorologist Kevin Williams. This is the Noon Report on Family Life. I'm your host, Bob Price. Lots to get to Friday, the 28th of August. The death toll continues to rise in the Himalayan mountains along the border between Nepal and Tibet. An apocalyptic flash flood caused by a glacier collapse has buried entire villages in mud and debris. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freer has the latest from Kathmandu.
Hundreds have been saved, but hundreds more are still missing. Outside a hospital in Kathmandu, posters are appealing for help. Dozens of Americans are still unaccounted for, among tourists caught up in the catastrophic flooding.
Rescuers today were forced to halt their work temporarily after a lake created by all that flood water burst its banks.
The biggest challenge is still access. The district that was most heavily impacted by this enormous flood is only accessible still by helicopter.
David Fisher with the Red Cross in Nepal is helping lead recovery efforts.
That flood knocked out the bridges, it knocked out the roads, and so fresh water is being brought in by helicopter. The Nepal Army is involved in rescue, but we have not been able to bring the relief items that people need there, nor have we been able to really do an assessment.
Flood victims are being pulled from the water, sometimes hundreds of miles downstream from where the initial disaster occurred. Today marks the 6-month anniversary of the war with Iran. 18 U.S. service members have died in the conflict. 750 have been wounded. 50,000 American troops are still stationed in the region. Shock poll out of Texas today. A Fox News survey shows Democrat James Tallarico with the lead over Republican Ken Paxton in the U.S. Senate race. President Trump was in Houston Thursday trying to rev up support for Paxton.
We're working very hard. We want to win that race. He's running against a man who should never be. We have a very good candidate, Ken Paxton, and he's running against Telefrico, they call him, because he is a little freaky, and that's not a man that represents the value of Texas.
It has been nearly 40 years since a Democrat has won a U.S. Senate seat in the Lone Star State. The commander-in-chief will be awarding the Artemis II crew the Congressional Space Medal of Honor today.
NASA says the Congressional Space Medal of Honor has been awarded to only a very select group of astronauts. The Artemis II crew, Reed Weissman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen, are part of that category for traveling further in space than humans have ever before. Their mission on the Orion spacecraft marked the first to take astronauts around the moon in more than 50 years.
Fox's Madeline Rivera. New York Governor Kathy Hochul's rejecting President Trump's name change for Lake Ontario.
Trump signed the executive order Thursday renaming Lake Ontario Lake America. And these guys are reacting from a Canadian sports bar in Chelsea.
Outraged over it, despite the fact that I might have some conservative political views. I think it's the same as the Gulf of Mexico. Like, why rename something? It's already there.
Governor Kathy Hochul says New York will not be calling it Lake America. The renaming comes as President Trump is in a trade war with Canada. Governor Hochul has been very critical of the trade war. She says it's having a big impact on New York since Canada is on the border. In New York, I'm Scott Pringle.
Thank you, Scott. You're listening to the Noon Report for a Friday on Family Life.
Welcome to Family Life Staycations, a summertime feature where we highlight great places to visit around the Family Life listening area. I'm Mark Webster, and this week we're off to the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum.
I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. I sleep all night and I work all day.
He's a lumberjack and he's okay. He sleeps all night and
Jennifer Haynes is an educator at the Pennsylvania Lumber Museum in Ulysses Township, nestled in the wooded mountains of Potter County, Pennsylvania. I know there was a day when lumber was absolutely huge in Pennsylvania. I know Williamsport once had at least the honorary title of lumber capital of the world.
That's correct. And lumber is still huge in Pennsylvania. They don't call it Penn's Woods for anything. The lumber industry has been an enormous one throughout the history of Pennsylvania, starting shortly after William Penn arrived with the harvesting of white pine. The white pine in Pennsylvania were really prized for the shipbuilding industry, in particular for the large spars, which are the long poles that would hold the mast for the giant sailing ships. So that was really the start of the lumber industry here in Pennsylvania, is harvesting those in particular for the British Empire, for their manufacturing of ships.
Wow. How did the Lumber Museum come to be in Little Ulysses there?
Really, starting in the 1950s or so, there was a group of men working in the lumber industry, both in Pennsylvania but also across this border in New York State. They called themselves the Penn Yorkers. And they were really seeing there had come a change in the lumber industry, and they were seeing sort of that past starting to disappear, and really that desire to save it, to have it shared, and lobbied the state of Pennsylvania to create a museum. We opened here at the museum in 1970, and we've increased and expanded a little over the years. There is our visitor center, which we share with visitors about a 15-minute orientation film about people's interaction with the forests over time. Times when Pennsylvania had nothing but trees, times when Pennsylvania had practically no trees, and what we can kind of learn from the past. And then outside on the property, we have about 10 acres. We have a number of outbuildings. We have a recreated lumber camp, so we give visitors an experience about what that lifestyle would have been like. The men here in Pennsylvania who were working in the forest historically were known as wood hicks. Basically what we would think of as a logger or a lumberjack today. And throughout much of the latter part of the 1800s and early 1900s, the industry was basically having their workforce out close to the trees themselves in very remote kind of wooded areas and mountains and valleys, harvesting the trees, and lumber camps dotted the countryside. So we give visitors kind of a sense of what that experience would have been like. They were very temporary structures. There could be a dozen to 100 men or more living at a logging camp. The men would have been living in kind of a dormitory situation. The visitors can kind of learn like what the day in the life of a wood hick would have been like. Outside, we also have our engine house, a couple of big pieces of equipment they would have been using. We have a Shay locomotive, which is a geared locomotive. Previous to geared locomotives, logs would have been transported in the early days of Pennsylvania with our rivers, the Allegheny, the Susquehanna, the Delaware. So there would have been a lot of logs being moved either as rafts to market or log drives, which is where you mentioned Williamsport really comes into play. They had what was known as a boom. Logs would float freely down the river, and they would end up in the boom and be stored there until they were pulled out and sent to about 30 different sawmills that operated in Williamsport.
This was hazardous work, wasn't it?
Very much so. Still is today, but you got to think you're dealing with logs that are hundreds of pounds. If you're on the river, one false move with your foot could be disastrous. If you're out in the woods, tree falling down, really dangerous. What's cool at the museum, we also have a sawmill. We're only able to power it up a couple of times during the year. We have volunteers. They help to get it running. And we actually have 2 original buildings that were moved onto the site. A small log cabin built by guys that were part of the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Great Depression. They were instrumental in helping to reforest Pennsylvania during the early part of the 1900s after years of deforestation. Created a number of our state parks.
Let's sum it up for listeners then. Walking into the Lumber Museum, what are you going to take away from that, do you think? What do you hope visitors take away?
I hope they take away the importance of the forest, both historically in Pennsylvania and still today. I hope they take away an appreciation for the hard work all these men and women. There were women at some of the camps cooking and that sort of thing. These people of the past did. And I also hope that folks start to think about maybe something that they can do in their lives. The lumber industry still exists in Pennsylvania. We're still using resources, but hopefully in a more sustainable fashion. For us, it's a really important story that visitors take away. What kind of small changes can I maybe do in my life to be good stewards of what we still have?
This has been Family Life Staycations, a weekly summertime feature highlighting great places to visit around the Family Life listing area. Please join us again next summer as we hit the road for more Family Life Staycations.
All right, Mark, what a treat to go on these adventures with you this summer. I know our audience appreciated it greatly. You can listen back to all Mark's staycation destinations online anytime you want to at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or FamilyLife.org. And also, coming up on Labor Day, September 7th, in place of the Noon Report, we're going to feature a special half-hour best of edition of Mark's staycation destinations. Hope you'll join us then. And finally at noon for a Friday Wing Fest. The largest chicken wing competition in the world kicks off tomorrow at Salem Field in Weyerhaeuser, Buffalo, New York. This year's festival is the 25th annual in the birthplace of the chicken wing. The founder of Wing Fest is the Wing King himself, Drew Cerza.
We were always on Labor Day weekend, but the Buffalo Buys schedule did not coincide with that. So we're a week earlier. It's the best road trip you can make to the Mecca, where it all started, Buffalo, New York. It's a $20 fee to come in. Chicken wing eating contest with the Joey Chestnuts of the world, bobbing for wings in a kiddie pool full of blue cheese, a baby wing pageant.
Bobbing for chicken wings. Sign me up. Cerza tells Spectrum News this year's festival features 15 restaurants from all over the country serving up a wide variety of chicken wing flavors. Over 100 different sauces will be featured, including nearly 60 new offerings this weekend. 15 tons of chicken wings will be consumed at Salem Field. Gates to Wingfest open at 11 a.m. both Saturday and Sunday. Come early and come hungry. And that's our world, the world we live in. Friday, the 28th of August. Have a wonderful weekend. I'm Bob Price, Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at FamilyLife.org.